sure everything is working real fast, and then we'll get started. So, for those of you who are just joining me, my name is Ashlee Marie, and every week I do a live cooking show here, and that is not what I tried to open. This is what I'm trying to open. There we go. Okay, so I was trying to think of something, because next week, well, first of all, happy Groundhog's Day. Not that I'm doing anything Groundhog's Day related, but there you go. So next week is Valentine's Day, and so I thought next Tuesday I would do some type of Valentine's dessert. I would love to hear requests from you guys for that. So for this week, I thought maybe we would prep some type of Valentine's Day dinner. I know a lot of people get reservations at fancy restaurants. Steak is always incredibly popular, at least it always was the way to my heart. I love steak, potatoes, rolls, favorite meal. Anyway, but that can get really expensive, and in this day and age, it's a lot harder to get reservations because everybody, you have to be 6 feet away, and it is a lot cheaper to make an incredibly high quality steak at home. Now, I have tried everywhere there is to make steak. Oven, stovetop, a mix of stovetop oven, smoker, grill, slow cooker. Actually, I didn't try that because, but my favorite, by far, like far and away, the best way I have ever made steak is the way I'm going to show you today, and that is sous vide cooking. Now, there are a couple different sous vide machines. Typically, they look like this, and I'll show you a close-up in a minute, but they go inside a container. They sell plastic buckets that are like this big that you can hook it onto, or you can just use whatever bowls or pots you already have. As long as it's deep enough to fit whatever it is you're trying to cook, you're good. Or right over here, I have this machine that is, they tend to be a mix if you get a sous vide machine. This one is sous vide or a slow cooker. I've also seen a lot of the pressure cookers have a sous vide function. Now, the pressure cooker's sous vide functions I have not found to be as accurate and as safe and as perfect as, either of these. But this one for sure is what I would recommend as a good way to go. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of brands out there now that sell them. Sous vide is not a new technique, but it's new in becoming mainstream and popular. You can cook so many things with sous vide. I love how sous vide cooks meats, all different types of cuts. I've done steak, obviously, and I've done a ton of different kinds of steaks to try to see what I like. And even cheaper cuts of steak turn out amazing with a sous vide. So it's a great way to go. I've done chicken, pork tenderloin, salmon, tuna, like not canned tuna, but like real tuna, eggs, egg bites. I think what else I've tried that I've just loved, like just so good. So the technique is actually a water bath technique. Ooh, I should try a cheesecake in it. It's a water bath technique, and everything is submerged in water and cooked at a lower temperature for a long time. Now, depending on how you want your meat to end up, rare, medium, medium well. Now, I don't recommend those last two ever. Depending on which one you want, that will actually determine the temperature that you set your machine to. It also, obviously, if you're cooking chicken and pork, you're cooking to a lower temperature than steak and salmon. And then the length of time is actually quite flexible. A minimum of 1 hour, typically, up to 4 hours for steak. Every different meat is a little bit different. But the great part is when you have a minute in your day, you can set it up and put it in and eat it hours later, and it's incredibly hands-off. So not only is this the most delicious way I've ever had steak, but it's also the easiest. So like win, win, win. So let's prep our steak first, and then I'll bring the machine over and we'll talk a little bit more about temperature and times and answer some questions if anybody has any. Okay. So I have a New York strip here, and it's about an inch thick. I like a minimum of an inch thick up to like 1.5 to 2 inches. So it just kind of depends on if you have a butcher or if you're just getting it straight from the meat section of the grocery store will decide, like, if you, yeah. I just found these at an inch thick, so I just grabbed them. But if you have a butcher and you can request a specific cut, that's great. So I'm going to freshly grate some salt. If you don't have a good salt grater, then I recommend using some coarse sea salt or kosher salt, right? A little bit more grainy is what I would recommend for that. And then also pepper. Now, there are a lot of schools of thought about salt and peppering meat. So if you are one of the people who doesn't like to salt and pepper the meat until after they've cooked it, that's just fine. You can skip this step. What I don't recommend is salting and peppering this and then leaving it, because that'll actually break down the meat, and I don't like the end result of the texture as much. But if you're up for experimenting, you can go ahead and try that. The great thing is you cook all these in individual packages, so you can really change things up. You can do one that's not salt and peppered, one that is salt and peppered, and one that you salt and peppered earlier, and see if you notice a huge difference. Now, the other thing that I'm going to add to mine is some garlic. Now, typically I like fresh garlic, but done a couple taste testings, and I actually like this store minced garlic the best out of all the ones I've tried. And again, I just do this, I'm trying not to get it too heavy-handed, right before I put it in the bag and put it in. There we go. And then finally, I like to add some aromatics. I really like thyme and rosemary. I'm going to add another thing of thyme. So personal preference, I always have thyme and rosemary around. They're some of my favorite herbs to use for most dishes. So, all right, now we want to put it in a water-safe bag. So there's a couple options. If you have one of those food savers, can't believe I still don't have one. That's a great way to go because it sucks all of the air out. It presses everything that you've added to your dish all together. If not, then the gallon, the thicker material, the gallon version, or freezer version of Ziploc bags. I have the quart size because that's what size my steak fits into really nicely. But you want to get the bag that fits whatever it is you're cooking with. So, I'm going to put my meat inside my bag. And then you want to try to get as much air out of it as you can before you close it up. One thing that I wanted to mention is if there's any air at all in here, this will float. You'll have some meat that's not in the water, and obviously that's not very safe. So one of the things that I did is I bought these Sous Vide weights, and they just go right in there. Silicones, they're food safe, and I just stick it right inside the bag. Now that's still a lot of air in there. Now obviously if you have a food saver, that sucks all the air out. If you don't, this is my trick. I'm going to bring this over here. Now, I happen to have this pot on the stove, but it's not using the stove power at all, so you don't have to worry about it. It can go on any counter, which is great, so you can use your stove for other parts of your dish. Okay. Sorry, making sure you can actually see in the camera what's going on. Okay. So I have mine set at 130 degrees because I like medium rare. So if you want rare, set it to 125, and all of these are on the blog post, and they are also in the description box on the YouTube video. So rare is 125, medium rare is 130, and medium is 135. I don't recommend medium well or well ever for steak, but if you want to know, medium well is 145, and well is 155. So obviously I have some in here already, but we're going to add this one. So one of the things that you can do is when you are putting your meat in, that's warm, right, is as you put your bag in, if you leave it open, the water will press against your bag and will actually help push as much air as possible out. So as soon as you get close to the top like this, that's when you can seal your bag, right? And look how much of that air it got out of there, right? Quite a bit. So put that in, make sure it's completely submerged. All of the sous vide machines are going to have a max line that you don't want to get above. Anyway, and then, like I mentioned before, for times for steak, the minimum you want to do is probably about an hour. Now, unless you're using a much smaller piece of steak, then you could go like 45 minutes. But I recommend an hour. Up to 4 is kind of the overall recommendation from all the sites out there. I personally, the longer you cook it, the more, instead of chew bite it gets, the more like shredded it gets. And I'm not looking for pulled beef here, right? So I like, my sweet spot is 130 for an hour and a half. That is where I have found that I like it best. I would not recommend going over 2.5 hours. I've just found that that's where, to me, it's just a little bit too long. But 4 hours technically is going to be okay. I've seen people do it all the way up to 24 hours. Now, I've done big pieces of meat, longer periods of time like that, but I don't like what it does to the texture 24 hours for this smaller fillet. Personal preference. Anyway, so I'm actually going to move this back out of our way. And I'm going to pull out, actually, before I do that. Okay. Once it comes out, now the great part about sous vide, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, is that when you are cooking steak on a hot surface, like on, in a pan, the outside, so this is our steak. The outside is always touching that heat, and the heat slowly works its way into the center cut. Now you want to cook it long enough that the center's not raw or unsafe to eat, but by the time that center is the perfect temperature, the outside is actually quite overcooked, which is why you get that gray tone and you don't get that pink until the center. The great part about sous vide is that it cooks at low temperatures and for a long time, and so it heats up so evenly that the center gets that perfect pink and the outside is still that perfect pink as well. And so when we pull it out of the machine, as I'm going to show you in just a minute, it's actually kind of an unattractive gray. It is 100% edible that way. You can pull it out of that bag and eat it, but for presentation's sake, for pretty's sake, and to release a little bit more flavor, we want to brown the outside. Now I've seen some recipes where people say to quickly brown it before you put it in the machine. And I've just got to say, you lose any of the crispness that browning it is going to give it by doing it that way. You'll still get that flavor profile of that quick sear, but, hold on, I need some oil. Yeah, you'll get the flavor of that quick sear, but you'll lose that great crisp outside. So I sous vide it first, then I take cast iron skillet or whatever type of skillet that you like, and all right, I'm trying to center it so you'll be able to see it on the overhead camera. And I'm getting this ready by doing medium high heat. Some people like to go straight high, so it's personal preference. Sometimes when I go straight high, it burns the outside instead of browning the outside. So it also depends on your burner and how high it goes. And let's move this camera. This. All right, so I put some oil in here, and now we're just waiting for it to kind of just smoke a little bit. That lets me know that it's nice and warm. So while that is heating, I'm gonna get a couple things ready. You can just quickly sear it in oil. I'd like to add a little butter for flavor. So I'm gonna set some of this aside. And the other thing that I like to add are more aromatics. Again, more thyme, a little bit more garlic, and a little bit more rosemary. So I'm going to get out a couple sprigs of thyme, some rosemary, a spoonful of garlic, and some butter, all ready to go, but I'm going to let the pan heat with just the oil first. Okay, oh man. I opened up that garlic and the thyme and rosemary, and I'm getting all these great smells right now. All right, before I pull that out, I'm going to quickly look and see if there's any questions or comment. Sunshine Baker, that's a lot of information. Yes, I tend to do that. Hopefully it made sense. Never knew you could make a steak like this. Oh, I've been making steaks like this for 6 years now. Oh, it's so good. Yes, I got myself extensions. Thank you so much, Paige and Janice. Glad you like it. Yeah, I didn't just grow it this fast in a month. Let's see. Wouldn't that be amazing to grow hair that fast? That'd be pretty fun. Margaret, you love garlic and herbs? Yes, right? Is there anything really that much better than garlic and herbs? Sam, hello, welcome. Shorty, hi. Man, we do not have a lot of comments over on Facebook this week. You guys are, maybe it's the Groundhog's Day. Maybe everybody's reliving the same thing over and over again. They've all forgotten to get on. All right. It doesn't seem like we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. Okay. So, let's show you what I'm talking about when I say that it's kind of not really attractive, right? You see how it's just kind of this weird shade of gray, and you're almost like, has that meat gone bad, right? But it hasn't. All right. I'm going to pull out the meat. I'm just going to set it down in a towel, just get rid of excess liquid. See, there's excess liquid in here, and we don't want to get that in our pan. And then I'm going to pat the top. You don't want to scrape because you don't want to accidentally get rid of everything, right? If I scraped instead of patted, I'd lose all that stuff. So I'm going to take out the rosemary and thyme that it's been sitting in, cooking in. Okay, this is nice and warm, and I'm going to put that right in there. We've got a nice sear started. Add a little bit of butter. And add these. And you want to just let that sit so that it browns. If you move it around too much, you're not going to get that same crust. I was looking for the spoon that matched the knife that I already used. Took me a second. And then one of the things I like to do is just take this butter that's in our herbs, right, and just pour that on the top. Now, depending on how hot your skillet is, because we don't want this to cook and get that brown that we were talking about. We don't want that brown to creep in on our center. So, we need a little bit longer. So as soon as it's brown enough, we want to flip it. You're making me hungry. Oh, good. Well, that is what hopefully I'm always doing. If you can't find fresh rosemary and thyme, where do you find? My grocery store always has some, so I guess I'm lucky that way. I'm actually looking to start growing it myself because I use it so often. If your grocery store doesn't have like individual containers of it, they might have like a poultry blend. And that usually has rosemary and thyme in the poultry blend. All right, I obviously didn't let my skillet get hot enough because it does not usually take this long. So usually, I would say usually it takes about 1 minute on each side or less. Like typically I usually flip it at the 45-second mark. Because of the live video, I didn't quite let my pan get hot enough, so that's my fault. So when you go to make it yourself, consider that. So this is going to take just a little minute. The other thing you can do is see how there's still a lot of the fat on here, right? Because so you can get your steak and hold it this way and cook some of that fat down on there as well. But yeah, usually it's just a flash in the pan to get it right. Hopefully by the time we move on to our other meat, this will be cooking a little bit better. You gotta love it when things go not as planned on a live stream, right? The weather has messed everything up. Oh, that's not good. Sorry about that. You gotta hate bad weather, right? David, good evening. Janice, hello. Peter, what's the blue tube in the bag? That is a sous vide weight. That's a great question. It keeps the sous vide bag from floating to the top if there's any extra air in it. We are just gonna let this second side get a little bit brown and then move on. The other options for browning, of course, is you can put it on the grill if you want. Ooh, that spit on me. I feel like that's my least favorite way, simply because unless you're using a direct heat grill, I have a smoker, not a direct heat grill, and so I feel like it just never gets that brown color without also cooking it too long. So personal preference, this is my favorite way. I have also seen people use big, huge torches, and while it's really fun to use a big torch to get that outside nice and brown, and it does give it a great crisp crust, I feel like you also kind of can sometimes get the gassy flavor. If any of you guys have that, right, from like that stove. But personal preference, I just find that this is my favorite way to do it. But my second favorite way is to use a big torch. All right. So we are going to take this off and bring it over here. And I'm going to let it rest for just a minute. And while I'm letting it rest, I want to talk about a couple other options. So I use this same method. Sorry, I'm looking for my pan to blow some of the smoke away from my camera. I use the same method for chicken and pork chops and salmon. Now we get some smoking going. So just to show you guys, I quickly did bags of all three. So before the oil gets too hot, let's show that. Now this is really going to smoke because the temperature is now up and hot. The chicken and the pork, I actually cooked the chicken and the pork I actually cooked at 140, not 130. The salmon that I'm pulling out now, I cooked at 130 for about 40 minutes. Look at that great brown color. I typically take the skin off, but this one is not peeling for me great. Ooh, dirty. Super flaky. Probably should have done my bigger pan. All right, I'm going to pull these off. Alexa, stop. I should use a spatula for the salmon. Okay. Now I can take this out of the way. Oh. Okay, now let's bring our meats in so I can show you how they look. So we will start with our steak. So, I don't know if you can see just how perfect that is. Right? See how that pink color extends from one end to the other? We just get a little bit of that gray from when we were searing it. So instead of getting just a little smidge that's perfect, this whole thing is perfect. Tuesday night to the nights, my kids eat dinner with their dad. This is like the best dinner ever. All right, so let's do the chicken now. This was kind of a fat chicken. I probably should have done it for another 15 minutes or so. But it's nice and juicy. Now, if you cook it at a slightly higher temperature, you'll actually change the texture of the chicken. So it is safe to eat at the 140 mark, but a lot of people might consider this a little too underdone for them. I think it's perfect. Now at the 140, so good. This will be really great, like sliced up and served with my Alfredo sauce or something warm. If you want to put it in a cold salad, or if you want to shred it, I recommend cooking it at like 150 for that same amount of time. You'll get not overcooked, but you'll just get it cooked to a different texture, where it will shred better, or it'll be safer to refrigerate afterwards to put in like a cold salad. So there's that. All right, let's look at the pork chop. Oh man, look how perfect that looks. So good. I've also done my full pork tenderloin recipe that I serve with my raspberry chipotle sauce this way. Now I still like my smoker because I like the flavor that the smoker gives it, but I love how this cooks pork. Now, pork can be a trickier meat. I don't love pork in the Instapot. I know I'm not the only one who's felt that way. I don't like the end texture of it, but I do love it in the sous vide. Now, chicken, I like it in the sous vide, but I also like it cooked in the smoker. I also like it cooked in the oven. Chicken, I pretty much like cooked any way there is but boiling. I have a bad history with that. But steak and pork chops, this is by far my favorite way. Favorite way. All right, and finally, let's take a look at the salmon. So with the salmon, it should just flake apart, right? Look at that. Right? It just flakes. Probably should have turned it this way so you guys can see. It's just flaking apart. So good. I went to take a bite and it like spilled all over my shirt. I would add some fresh lemon juice when serving this. Now for this one, I did salt and pepper. I also added a little bit of dill and some lemon zest. And then I would serve this with some fresh lemon wedges to squeeze over the top. It's really similar to my lemon herb salmon that I bake in the oven. So good. Yeah, definitely my favorite way to cook salmon as well. Unless you're trying to serve a full fillet, obviously you want to serve this in portion. You want to cook this in portion size in the sous vide. So I'll still do the oven baked salmon sometimes just because it displays so nicely, but I always find that the thin end cooks too fast and the fat end then needs to go back in the oven for a little bit of time. So this method, you don't have that. Or if the thick part is cooked enough, then the edges tend to be overcooked, and fish is so sensitive. So by cooking it this way, I find that I get perfect results where my thin parts and my thick parts are both perfectly cooked. So it is my new favorite way to do salmon as well. Anyway, that is everything. So, all-time favorite way for steak and pork and salmon, and it's a good way for chicken, although I like chicken pretty much all the ways. So, I will stay on and answer any last-minute questions that there is. Otherwise, I will see you guys next Tuesday. I was planning on doing some kind of Valentine's Day dessert, so let me know if you have any Valentine's desserty requests, or if you would like me to just do some kind of Valentine's cake. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next week. Okay, is that salmon? Yes. Looks delicious. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Man, we've got a slow crowd on Facebook today. All right. Pasta carbonara. Actually, that's really funny that you would ask that, Paige. I debated between doing carbonara and doing the sous vide today. And I asked my friends, and the sous vide won. So I do plan on doing carbonara at some point coming up. It is one of my favorite dinners. It is my son Jonathan's. Other than tomato soup and grilled cheese, that's his number one. Carbonara is his number two favorite dinner. I absolutely love it. So yes, I have made it. I have a recipe on my site, and I will be making it for a live probably next month. All right, looks so yummy. Yes, it does. I have some baked potatoes in my oven, just waiting for me to do baked potato. Chocolate lava cakes. Laura, I've actually done chocolate lava cakes before, and I've done them with 4 different fillings. I don't think it was a live stream, though. I don't remember. but I did them with the normal, like just put it in the oven, bake it, and the center has that great chocolatey rawness. I also did it where I added caramel, Nutella, and peanut butter to the insides as well. I think I probably did it the first year I was doing live, so it might be back a ways. Yeah, lava cakes are probably the ultimate Valentine's Day dessert, right? I was thinking I have little heart-shaped cheesecake containers so we could do like an Oreo or chocolate or raspberry cheesecake. We could do creme brulees, right? I've done a pumpkin creme brulee, but I haven't done chocolate, vanilla, maple, caramel. I haven't done any other flavors of creme brulees before. Ice creams, of course. I do so many ice cream recipes out there. I think I've already shared my flourless chocolate cake. My raspberry and chocolate heart-shaped macarons. Those are a fun one. Or, of course, a cake, like with hearts and pinks, and I'll figure out some fun cake thing. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. And I've got up all the questions. So I will say goodbye and see you next week. And thank you so much for watching. Raspberry cheesecake sounds delicious. Yes, it does. I agree.